VGM together. How's it going? Welcome aboard Challenger Approaching, perfecting a fighting game OST with your hosts, me, DS, aka DS Music,
and me, Noah of NC Symphonies.
We are the two idiots who like fighting games. We share three brain cells, but today we're about to expand our minds to get you into the world of fighting game music. So first of all, let's start off simple. Just give a little bit about ourselves.
Yeah, I'm Noah of NC Symphonies. I'm a video game inspired musician. I am a huge fighting game fan. I'm huge into Smash Brothers. I fact and run a Smash team, if any of you guys are watching. Hi. You guys get to join us for the first time, so I can't wait.
This is the sucker that got me into Smash Brothers anyway in the first place. But a little bit about myself. I am DS, aka DS Music. I know, super original. I've been a VGM musician starting on YouTube since 2015, playing piano covers, but I also arrange things, produce like electronic music, along with dabble with audio engineering. I'm also a fighting game player, originally playing Smash Bros with Noah. But actually, funny enough, around like a year and a half ago, I decided I wanted to try out some more traditional fighting games. So I got into Dragon Ball FighterZ, and man, that just opened up a gateway into a whole ton of anime fighting games. And like, it's gotten to the point, it's so bad at this point that just this last January, I spent my entire month making this bad boy. You see this, Arcade Sick? Got the art commission, all the buttons and whatnot. Fighting games are a drug, people, and this is where it gets you. But also, but with fighting games, I also love the music so much. Like, the music is one of the things that got me into the genre, and I love also remixing these tracks from fighting games. And I'm an engineer from Rochester Institute of Technology, but that's irrelevant for this panel. But anyway, so let's get into this little simple question that we wanted to answer in this panel that ends up not being as simple as we thought. What makes a fighting game OST good? And
it sounds like a simple question, but there's a lot more layers to it than you think.
So first of all, a quick background for any of y'all that in the VGM scene that aren't as familiar with fighting game OSTs. To put it in a little bit complex terms, fighting game OSTs are generally considered hype, and they generally have certified bangers. But what is it about these tracks that makes them like so revered throughout the VGM and fighting game scenes? Well, throughout our research and a couple interviews that we've done for this panel, we've managed to break together two main points that we kind of found intertwined with each other to bring about how good fighting game music is. So the questions we want to ask about these 2 points are: one, how does interest in fighting game music span to generations of players and keep the genre alive? Are fans drawn toward the music, or does the music evolve off the fans? Basically, is the music intrinsically good to the game, or is it the value of the community of fans that brings the hype for the music? And so we're going to divide this into two parts, with my part being the first being, how did the culture of fighting game community influence game soundtracks? And for that, we're going to have to go way to the beginning, all the way in the arcade games, a little history lesson about the FGC, or fighting game community, as it's commonly called. And yeah, I know I said history lesson, but don't worry, there's no pop quiz, I swear. But you better be taking notes, though. Anyways, so a little bit of history about the arcades, and we're just gonna start right around the 70s and 80s time period. The arcade was like the best place to go to play any sort of games, especially fighting games, due to the hardware in arcades being a lot better than the typical consoles. Whereas you have these nice giant arcade machines that can make these gorgeous graphics and sounds that play at 60 FPS, whereas modern consoles were basically struggling to run Pong at that point. Not exactly, but you get the point. And so now, the challenge of an arcade and the people who are developing for arcades is that it's basically a capitalistic nightmare in there. You have a whole ton of machines vying for the kids' attention, but you want kids to come put quarters in your machine. So how do you design games that will appeal to these kids and get them to play your game? So in general,
sensory overload.
So in general, like, one of the some of the main points that any game would do is to make their arcades and their cabinets very loud and flashy. And especially in fighting games, this was exemplified through the original Killer Instinct, which we can't get into because we don't have as much time right now, but it's a very good documentary called Fight On, a Killer Instinct documentary, which gives some really interesting points about the franchise and its history, especially how they literally programmed some of the sound effects to be hidden and be louder than was allowed to be in arcades, so that when you heard the terms like when you heard like combo breaker, it would be super loud and get your attention. And one actual example that we can bring up is the main theme of Mortal Kombat, which everyone knows and loves. And so this main theme starts very straightforward, gets to the point. Has this very acid techno vibe about it, which was very popular at the time. And then it also had loud and flashy effects like Mortal Kombat. You hear that in the arcade, and it just brings you to like want to try and play it out, along with having this very driving 4-on-4 beat. It wastes no time getting to its point. It wants you to come play it. And what was especially challenging about fighting games in particular, because any other arcade game, like, sure, you can go play and have a good time and leave, but for fighting games, there was a lot of things that it had to hook you into. It had to hook you into come play the game. It had to stay hype, as you have to wait in lines in order to get to the front of the line, because people have to play like these 5 to 7 minute matches, and you have to wait in line for your chance to get the next turn. And then so you have to be hyped enough to stay in the line for that long, and then also you have to, once you get there, once you are hooked on the arcade machine, that then reels you in with the exciting gameplay and the very tight controls and responsiveness, along with the rivalry that's still between you and the other player that you have to play against. And it was this rivalry that started to develop in these early days, where the arcade competitive scene grew in places such as Chinatown Fair over in New York, where a bunch of famous fighting game professionals started. And these rivalries that start over these staples of the genre were what started to fuel the competitive edge and the competitive hype of the fighting game community. So around a little bit later, or like early 90s, later in the 90s, that's when consoles started to rise and started to be synchronous with arcade machines. You'd have like very famous fighting games such as Soul Calibur or Mortal Kombat being ported to consoles like the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation, and these were a much better deal, because for the price of a console and for a game, you could get unlimited rematches. We wouldn't have to like spend your quarter for each match, along with consoles exclusive features such as single player content, and the added bonus of portability, which means that you can go take your lunchbox GameCube and maybe your CRT if you're feeling really extra, and bring it over to a friend's house in order to have little tourneys with your friends to see who's better. And these sort of rivalries that fueled like neighborhood tourneys, state tourneys, even eventually international tourneys, which we'll get into later, is what really drove this competitive scene where people had this grassroots mentality of they want to be the best in their area, and there was hype developing behind who can be the best. And so,
never was.
And so these last two areas that we'd mentioned about the rise of consoles being able to, and the arcade scenes, both started growing the fighting game community and planted the seeds of nostalgia. Whereas at that age, most people weren't paying attention to the music; they were more paying attention to gameplay. There was an unconscious relationship being put together between the hype gameplay and the rivalries, along with the fun of the fight and the music that colored it. And here's a quote that I had from a panel I did last year at MagFest about why video game music is memorable. It's because memorable music is created from an intersection of emotions and personal culture developed with time. And fans establish this connection with the fun time of the game and the music, giving it that hype feeling. So a couple of quotes that we had from interviews that sort of mirror this sentiment is, one of our interviews was Dewey Newt, who is a VGM remixer who is in Pixel Mixers. And he's also inspired by some of the soundtracks such as Street Fighter, and he had this to say about his experiences growing up listening to these soundtracks.
As a kid, I think we had one of the Street Fighter 2s, I don't remember, but I think we also had Alpha 2 on Super Nintendo. So that was like the first fighting game series I ever played was Street Fighter. But I was bad. I was like 4 years old, and my brothers are all older than me. They just stomped me every time. I really got into listening to VGM, probably started listening to specifically fighting game tracks at work. I want to say I started at Street Fighter just because I was familiar with it. A bit of it just comes from nostalgia, I'll say, like Melee soundtracks, just like, oh, Menu 1, like, what can you say about the Menu theme? It's just is. You're a 6-year-old and you hear all this crazy orchestral horns blaring, and it gets you pumped up to be Pikachu and fight ice climbers. I guess a lot of mine's from nostalgia and then listening as an adult now.
And another interview that we had that sort of mirrored this sentiment was our interview with Garrett Williamson, who is a...
one of our heroes.
Yeah, it was honestly an honor to get him on board this panel. But he's, for the context of this panel, he was the composer of some of the soundtrack for the documentary Metagame, which depicted like some of the story and history behind the competitive scene of Super Smash Bros. Melee. And he had this to say about his experiences growing up with Melee soundtrack.
If we're to go back to Melee, listening to that music, I've gotten used to it at this point, but if I really think about it, for sure that's one of those that I think there's elements where I'll hear stuff and it takes me right back to like that TV in my friend's corner back in like 2004, playing the game and having a good time and whatnot.
And so yeah, we'll mention more about the Melee menu soundtrack later, don't you worry. It's going to be quite a point.
We're going to have a whole segment devoted to it, and it is going to be glorious.
So, anyways, now moving more into the late 90s, almost early 2000s, these fighting games began to become more complex and developed even more fans, especially with like the golden age of one of the golden ages of fighting games, where you had games releasing like such as Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, one of the pinnacles of fighting games basically. And fighting game developers began to see culture popping up all over the world in these like arcade and console scenes, from Japan to America to Europe, and so they took inspiration from the hype music associated with these scenes and fan bases in order to draw them in. And so one strike, I won't be able to play all the examples because we don't have enough time, but we will have the presentation linked in the VGM Together Discord along with our socials later, so you'll be able to listen to more of the examples. But one that I really want to bring attention to is the soundtrack for Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. Whereas the Street Fighter 2 soundtrack had a World Warrior vibe, where it's a bunch of different cultures around the world represented in the music. Street Fighter 3 sort of narrowed it down into a grungy sort of punk hip-hop aesthetic, and one track that really personifies this is Akuma's theme from Third Strike. So you notice how different this is from like Guile's theme or Ryu's theme or something. You notice the very heavily sampled like string and flute in the background, along with the repetitive and distorted amen break that was very characteristic of hip-hop music at the time. And it was this grungy feeling that Street Fighter 3 Third Strike wanted to encapsulate, which also appealed to the community that was based more around, like, remember how I mentioned Chinatown Fair, the New York arcade earlier? Well, that appealed more to the hip-hop scene in the sort of urban areas, and so that's how the game was able to establish, its music was able to establish a connection with the people in these scenes. And
had that sort of grungy sound to it. It was like so 90s.
And one person that we interviewed who had some fond connections with this was Gamera, who is the bass player for the video game jazz remix band The Consoles, who have also been famous for covering a couple of fighting game tracks. However, unfortunately, so
we tried to record the interview with him. Unfortunately, the footage got corrupted.
Yeah, the audio got corrupted, so we only have like quotes to go off of, but he had some very good points to make about fighting game tracks, especially how he grew up in the Japanese arcade scene and grew up with Street Fighter 2, whereas he wasn't very entranced by the music of that. However, once he heard the music from Third Strike, just the way that like the arcade machines could like process these complex sounds together and make this really distinct sonic environment, that's what drew him into fighting game music, basically. And he's another example I really can't get into, but if you have time, look up Daisuke Ishiwatari. We'll mention him later in some music, but he was a huge metalhead who took his metal upbringing and roots and brought them into the game, which made the series Guilty Gear super metal. Anyway, so now we are moving on from the late 90s and more into the early 2000s, when gaming started to have a change. It became more mainstream. You had games like Call of Duty, you had games like Halo, Half-Life, all starting to pop up and make gaming more mainstream. And whereas arcades used to be all the rage back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where it was a melting pot of games and people, with the rise of consoles and famous consoles games, the genre of fighting games actually became more niche because it wasn't as easy to pick up and play as the other popular games at the time. There was a very high skill floor, and you had to put in work to get good at these games. So now, instead of people flocking to the new arcade machines that were hype, it became the fighting game community's job to entice new players. And one example of enticing new players we found was of an interview we got from Dr. Blue, who's a Dragon Ball FighterZ content creator, along with a music educator and a drummer. And actually, some of his videos he's put on YouTube. And a family man. Yes, he is a family man. And some of his videos are him breaking down complex Dragon Ball FighterZ combos into rhythmic inputs, so you can know like what beat you want to put in make each input of the combo, which lowers that skill floor so people can visualize when they hit complex combos. And he had this to say about growing the FGC.
We're still very, very small, and it's only recently that a lot of eyes have been turned on it. But if you think about it, people have been fighting like since the dawn of mankind. I feel like if we find a way to lower that skill floor, like you were saying, that we're looking at the next boom in video gaming.
Now, along with lowering the skill floor, another way for newcomers to be interested in the fighting game community is through all the hype moments that have been portrayed throughout the history. Such moments such as Evo Moment 37 or the Wombo Combo. These moments are like seeing fighting games on the big stage at Evo with thousands of people watching. This is what gets people hyped to try to do these sort of things in their own matches. And people are drawn in toward the hype that is generated by the community. And Garrett had this to say about attending competitive events and how the community influenced his making of the metagame soundtrack.
I definitely composed most of the music based on. I had actually only ever gone to one.
Iconic it is, Sean. Iconic it is.
The absolute hype from being at SmashCon and watching those guys play and the whole audience and everybody freaking out. I definitely heard certain music in my head when watching those matches and seeing the hype in the audience and everything. Just that the energy of that, I totally heard a certain, maybe not like a distinct piece in my head, but I heard a certain sound.
So developers now are noticing this change in the trend and how the fighting game community is trying to keep itself together. So in order to, with the advent of these new mainstream games, so in order to keep up with the global game market or game culture, developers have to expand on some of the core aspects of fighting games. No longer just two people romping. You need to make it immersive. You have to make it a grand experience. And so some of that, it comes down to the music, which is also enveloped by the expansion of single player content, which I can't really get into. We won't have enough time for it. But just a quick shout out to our man, the myth, the legend, Doug Perry, who actually played on the main theme to Mortal Kombat 11. Gosh, what a man! Our fearless leader.
Thank you so much, Doug, for making a masterpiece.
But yeah, single player content developed in order to help people. And one of the main key aspects I want to bring that is music related is the diversification and bigger rosters of characters embodied by the iconic line from Smash Bros. Ultimate, "Everyone is here," where you have a whole ton developers start making a whole ton of new characters, diverse play styles, and just different kinds of characters. And this is echoed through the different genres of music that are represented in their character themes. So I won't be able to play all these examples, but a couple iconic ones I will play is Susanoo's theme from BlazBlue Central Fiction, aka Must Die. So a bit background on the character. He's basically an ancient god of destruction, which is kind of apparent because his name is based off of mythological references. So his theme starts out as a very traditional vibe. You notice like the classic like Kodo, like flute samples, but now then it goes right into headbanging heavy metal goodness. This is actually composed by Daisuke Ishiwatari, who I mentioned earlier. And you can see, especially later in the track, you can see how the different elements of the track blend very well together. You notice like how the traditional instruments are mingling with like the visceral, ritualistic chanting in the background, along with like the driving percussion and metal guitar riffs, and just creates this absolutely visceral experience. And this character is pretty cool, not gonna lie, and that's the reason why he's the guy on my fight stick. Susanoo mains for life.
God, you are so head over heels in love with him, aren't you?
Gosh, we will. Oh yeah. Anyway, so next example I want to bring up is from an indie fighting game called Rivals of Aether, which if you haven't played Rivals of Aether, you should they definitely deserve more love. You should check them out. It's basically like a Smash-oriented platform fighter, which is heavily based in a. And you can't grab ledge, yeah. But there's a bunch of other cool things, and it has a very 16-bit aesthetic, and you'll hear this in Fire's Last Hope, which is Claren's theme. Also, a bit of background on Claren. She is basically furry Trunks. She comes from the future. She's gonna fight to make sure the future doesn't end up like that.
That's a good description.
So yeah, you notice like the very like neon aesthetic, the Blade Runner aesthetic. It's very futuristic, very and then this comes in. Yeah, you notice how he gets this really heroistic, this very heroic 16-bit melody, which encapsulates like Clarence theme of being a hero from the future, along with the 16-bit aesthetic of the game, and that is why this whole entire soundtrack is just so freaking good. There's so many good tracks, and the game is so good, and the plushies are so good. Say hi to Claren. She's a good girl.
Hi, Claren.
Anyways, I won't get able to mention all these exact examples, but they're basically just showing how diverse the music genres can get in these fighting games. And why have a more diverse fighting game cast? Why not just have the same core characters? Why is adding more actually beneficial to the game? And yes, it is. Adding more characters and more music themes will be able to cater to more play styles and fighting style archetypes that connect to more players. Because people want to play a character that they like their fighting style and they want to express themselves in their character. And so a quote that we got that sort of echoes this sentiment is from Sexy Mallard, who is part of Doug Perry's VGM community, along with being an avid fighting game player. Like, man, I have played this guy in Dragon Ball FighterZ so many times, I can't lay a finger on him. He's just too good. He's been going at it for a while. Here's what he had to say about like picking up new characters in games and learning about, and also listening to the soundtracks. Also with a bit of context, this is him talking about picking characters in BlazBlue Central Fiction.
There are times that there are characters that I saw that I wanted to try, and then I play it and I didn't like it, but then found another character that I loved in the roster. And Jin was the first person I picked up, and he just didn't speak to me. And then I did Hazama. I think it's because Hazama was nothing I ever experienced in a character. He is so unique, and I think that's what made him so fun. The funny thing is, even though I love Guilty Gear's music, I think BlazBlue, if we're talking about like Central Fiction, so with everything, is a better complete package.
You mean like genre-wise, like more variety?
More. I like the music. I like way more songs in the BlazBlue album than I do in Guilty Gear now. They're just so almost every character's theme I like a lot. Makoto's theme, Alexandrite, is pretty good. The red hair girl before she changes to Izuyoi, I don't know her name, but her theme is really good. Hazama's is obviously really good. Ragna's is good. Like Ragna versus Jin's theme is good. There's just so many good songs.
And yeah, so you can see how these catering to more playstyles and character archetypes helps further cement the connection between the player and the character, which also helps cement the connection between the player and the music. Which actually brings up an interesting point. While you can add as much new stuff to your fighting games as you want, fighting games need to have this delicate balance between introducing new stuff to help build connections with new players, but also being able to cater to veterans. And this also is reflected in the music, such as remixes of classic tunes, such as a Killer Instinct main theme, which Mick Gordon composed in order to evolve the franchise over the years. The Killer Instinct, a reboot, because there was a 2013 reboot that happened that was composed by Mick Gordon, and we'll talk about that later. Yeah, you can hear more about all that also in the Killer Instinct documentary. But one interesting interview that we got was Chernobog, who is the composer of the Super Smash Flash 2, one of the lead composers of the Super Smash Flash 2 OST. And for those of you who didn't play Super Smash Flash 2 back in like middle school or high school on some web browser, rest in peace to Adobe Flash. But basically,
you clearly never lived in middle school or high school if you haven't played it at least once.
But it's like
taking a break from cool.
It's like a Smash fan game. It's a culmination of a ton of different franchises, including like they also had like Sora, they had Goku, they had Chibi Robo. It's a whole amalgamation of franchises, but
that Nintendo would never touch.
But Chernobog had some interesting things to say about how, even though he had like complete control over his remixes for the game, there was a balance that he had to strike.
You will always have to more or less face the reaction of your fans when you release the music or when it plays in game. You will have some fans who want something that's exactly like the original, and you will have some fans who will welcome very well a lot of changes you can bring to an arrangement. What you can try to do in that case is, like I said, try to find a kind of middle ground, stay like close to the original so it fits the universe, the game, the original music, and try to bring something original to differentiate a little the music you want to create.
All right, yeah. And through this, so basically, to sum up everything I've basically said, the connection between music, at least as far as the cultural connection goes, the connection between music and the fighting game community was built up through the grassroots arcade community, which laid a groundwork of nostalgia to build upon. That groundwork then evolved as music was molded to fit the ever-evolving games that are put out, to please the ever-evolving communities of casuals and veterans. Throughout it all, people have come to associate the hype and fun they've had playing fighting games with the music that colored these fights due to the careful execution of this music by the fighting game developers. And just a little quick personal story to show the truly humanistic connections within the FGC. We had Dr. Blue speak about an experience he's had with one of his students. If I can play the audio file.
Specifically, I have one of a student, and he came in one day. His name was Davis, and he was like, I want to learn Avenged Sevenfold. And from there, because I love Jimmy the Rev Sullivan from Sevenfold so much, we developed like a kinship. And so anytime I would get into something new, I would be like, hey, what do you hear? Can you feel the 30-second notes? Do you feel how it goes from duple to triple time? What do you think about the time signature? What's happening here? So anytime I would find something new with Dragon Ball FighterZ or anything along that nature, I would bring it to him. Anytime I hear fighting games, it just reminds me of that era.
Anyway, just for a little bit of context, Dragon Ball FighterZ has an OST that's very metal, very reminiscent of Daisuke Shibutari soundtracks, and that's how you can see the connection made between the music in the game and the people playing the game, which also brings a connection between the people playing the game, which just further cements their connection with the music. And so overall, you can see how it's this evolution of the community and music that ties to themselves together very well, which established this era of hype and also catered to the needs and the wants of and the different definitions of hype that their audience had. However, your music can't just be hype just because it is. There are certain quality standards that you need for your music to be good game music. So now we're going to move over to Noah, where he's going to talk about the different musical and game development techniques that help build this hype. How can a fighting game music fulfill the hype quota, even for a casual with no experience in the genre? How can they hear just from the music in the game itself, like, yes, this is the hype we were trying to build to?
This is the hype music. So yeah, I'm finally allowed to talk. Dobby is free. No, so we're gonna talk a little bit about how the soundtrack, each song in the soundtrack, sort of brings everything together and makes this cohesive experience that immerses the player into the game even further. So first, we're gonna throw a little fancy word at you called ludomusicology. Don't get intimidated. It's basically the study of music in video games and the context in which it plays and how it interacts with the games, which can include how the sound like syncs up with the game. It can be how it's composed. It can be how it relates to the technology. But overall, its main goal is to help players just feel more immersed in the game. It helps them experience a whole lot more, because if not, it would just be insanely dead. And Garrett echoes this sentiment really well.
Yeah, hold up. Sorry.
I know some people have argued that it's like, what is it, like 50% of the experience of a game is the audio.
Okay. And so so you can see that it's kind of ubiquitously shown that you have all of these players who can agree that the music can make all the difference, and especially with like snappy, commanding opening themes that are almost reminiscent of those days where they had to compete back in the arcades. And there are two ways that the music can build up hype in the modern day console games. So first off, you could have something like Smash 64, where you have like something that's silent, and then like a slow ambient music when you go through the menus, and then to the character select screen and stage select screen where it just revs you up with the bum, dum, and then it goes straight into the match, which is where, the actual climax is. Or you could do something that the DBFZ online lobby or every Smash game since Melee does, and that is keep one song playing the whole time to keep that excitement sustained throughout the whole thing, and just have it repeat to sort of let the player take their time yet still feel excited. And so now that we sort of have an idea of the importance of the music generally, there is a very, very specific balance that they have to keep. they have to be able to complement the tone of this game, but they also have to be able to they also have to be able to react, but they also have to be able to drown that out and just focus straight on the match. And that means that that they can't have something that like overshadows the song. You need to have the songs that are playing in the background but still have the sounds of the sonic foreground. And Dr. Blue carries this sentiment across well as well.
Playing?
And I feel like fighting game music is so brilliant because it's just going on in the background and you don't really notice it. You're just trying to land that combo, but then all of a sudden it's in your head. You've heard it so many times. It's just like baked in there.
All right, you good?
And so, yeah, and so just something else. You have to be able to withstand listening to it repeatedly, especially because you're going to be hearing it a lot. Like, it shouldn't be a chore to go back to the menu. In fact, even Gamera put it perfectly. What he said he would do for like a perfect fighting game song is, if you put somebody in a room, you leave them in there, and you play it for them like 4 or 5 times or like multiple times, and they're not sick of it, then you've made a song that like is tolerable. And you made a song that's exciting. It can sort of withstand people going back to it constantly. Speaking of balance, we are going to do a little bit side-by-side comparison of the tonal balance between the modern day and the days of old, with more established franchises like Street Fighter. And specifically, we're going to go over the differences and similarities between each character's themes in each game. So, for example, you take a listen to Ryu's theme from Street Fighter 2. You can feel it's like this really bouncy, energetic kind of sound that still conveys the Japanese character trait that Ryu is known for. But it also stays all one dynamic, staying within the limitations of the consoles at the time. And similarly, I hate to cut it short, but like in a similar vein, you have Ken's theme that also does something similar, but I think arguably it does it better, because with Ken's theme, you have something that's a little bit more blam and in your face, something that's very reminiscent of who Ken is as a character. He's very spry, up and at him. You're ready to go, he's ready to go, he's ready to throw down.
All right.
And now that we actually go into the modern day a little bit closer, we're going to flash forward to 2010 with Street Fighter 4.
What a good game.
And yes, such a good game, and the soundtrack sounds even better. It has a very, very cool, very EDM-inspired sound. And if you listen to Ryu's theme, it plays back to that old riff that made Ryu's theme, but it adds this new stanky kind of grunge to it that really gets the blood pumping, gets everyone excited. Excited to get that. And then topping that,
oh gosh, here we go.
Fighter 4, yeah, this is where it gets interesting. It's get that heavy bass.
Here comes the bass. Let me get your steak faces in the chat.
This is like stank face all over. If there's any stank face in the chat. But like, now after the stank face, for as much as I'd love to keep that going, we have going fast forward to another few years ahead in Street Fighter 5. You have the tonal balance for Ryu's theme, which goes back to this rock kind of sound. It goes back to this energetic, almost orchestral sound to it. And like, from there, you just get something that's really high band. Still, I mean, through familiarity, you know it's Ryu's theme, but it just injects more life into it, which is something you sort of need in a fighting game to stay relevant. And now for Ken's theme, it's something similar. It goes back to the roots of the original key, but it also adds this new flair with a solo. And it is like so all over the place. It's so up and at 'em. It really sort of reflects Ken, but still adds more life to it. And I mean, outside of, you know, giving him a ponytail, which also added a lot.
Banana Ken.
Oh god. So now that we've gone over the old classics. And
yeah, remember when we mentioned Melee Menu 1?
Oh yeah. Buckle in, boys and girls. For good little boys and girls, we have the one song that refuses to die. And it is the Melee Menu 1 theme. Garrett, would you like to hype us up a little?
It's one of the most like hype.
Oh, oops, wait, accidentally went forward a slide. Let me try it again.
It's one of the
I see he doesn't want to hype us up.
Like one of the most hype melodies that I can think of off the, like if somebody says like think of something
Dave, what are you doing?
Hype. One of the first things that I'm going to think of is that like menu music from Melee.
If you didn't get it from, if you didn't get the point from Garrett's speech, it's pretty hype. Not gonna lie. You ever hear the word hype more times in a sentence?
Yeah.
This song is that.
That's gonna be this panel. It's just hype, 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 and more hype. So don't be afraid of the sheet music that's on this slide. You don't have to read it. I mean, unless you understand it. But yeah, no, this song, it does so much, and it does so much well. There's a lot it does well. So, first off, it complements the tone of the game perfectly, and the whole franchise in general, actually, because you have a song that's semi-serious in tone that perfectly complements the fact that you take these cartoonish-looking Nintendo characters and you put them into this, sort of semi-serious brawl where like they're ready to fight, but they know it's partially in good fun. The melody itself, there's a lot of bounciness to it, and there's a lot of bounciness. You can hear it like goes up, it jumps all over the place with the strings. It sort of jumps around, it stays still, and then it passes off the melody to another instrument later on, like the brass section, and then it passes back and forth. Like it's very similar to that nature where you have a fighting game that's not just one franchise, it's like a multitude of franchises, and it encapsulates that so well. And what's even cooler is that it doesn't repeat for 50 seconds. And that's honestly a short amount of time for you to sort of get back into hearing something that's repetitive but doesn't get too grating. To comment on this, we have Dr. Blue and Garrett again.
All right, playing Dr. Blue.
There's a really quick shorthand for writing pop. It's repetition breeds catchiness. If you can't figure out a rhythm slightly and it's just like slightly off and you're trying to like mull it over in your head, that's how things get stuck in your head. That's what makes things catchy.
You want me to play Dr. Garrett right now?
No, hold on a sec for that.
Okay.
Those first few words, the repetition breeds catchiness, that's something that rings true for every fighting game. But this game just does it well. And even with that semi-serious tone and that seriousness represented by the bass line that stays mostly stagnant, you have a song that really just fits the tone so well. Like, I can honestly gush about this for ages. What does Garrett have to say?
Let's see, Garrett.
I think what it said, and I think what a good fighting. Anytime I've played a fighting game, I think what it says is, or at least the goal has been, it's that attitude of. I think what it's trying to do is give you almost the same feeling as if you were actually getting into, like, say, a real wrestling match or something. You know what I mean? It's like one of those. It's one of those deals where it's like, all right, we're gonna get you hyped up because you're gonna go in there and you're gonna kick some serious butt.
Heck yes, let's go kicking butt.
Let's go kicking butt and wrestling matches. Like, honestly, wrestling matches is like the perfect analogy for it. So as we move on to technologies that have more access to more dynamics and less restrictions for what kind of sounds you can make, you have these far more interesting mechanics in games, like how, going back to Street Fighter V, you have a song like Colin's theme, or Colin's, however it's pronounced, and you have a song that starts off semi-serious, it's quiet, and then it builds up to this exciting, sort of intense sound where you have like these grungy guitars overlaying with it, these vocal textures from the choir, this sort of shredding vocal, that shuffling snare drum. It just adds so much to the intensity. Like, you feel like you're evolving with the music, is what it is. And it feels so enveloping. And going back to Killer Instinct, which we mentioned earlier, in this game...
Yeah, one thing we couldn't pass up on mentioning.
Yeah, exactly. That this game does something insanely innovative and something really cool. It's that it takes the sound, it takes the background music, it syncs with the act on screen. It matches the tone, it speeds up, it slows down, and more importantly, in your ultra combos, you can sync up the moves, your ultra combos, to the rhythm of the music. That envelops you so much because it gives you so much control. It gives you that sense of, yeah, I carried this intensity, I carried the magic, I carried all of this.
But we shouldn't be the ones telling you this. You should watch it and listen to an example real quick. This is absolutely cool.
From Jago's Ultra Combo from 2013. I believe there are only like 4 or 5 characters in that game that can do those, that can pull off the combos.
Ultra Combo!
That's our obnoxious voice again. But like, yeah. So now that we have like something that's like really immersive, let's go into a little bit of the subtleties of the songs. So obviously you want a song that's hype. You want a song that engages people. You want a song that will make people want to like go forth and beat each other up, put in quarter circles and all of that, and jibbly junk.
The secret motions.
Basically. The ones I refuse to learn as a Smash player. And we go into this sort of area where you need to have nuance in your, you have some sort of nuance in your fighting game songs. So like you want something that sort of complements the tone and the visuals. I think a game that really does this well is Smash Ultimate, and that might be a little bit of an umbrella, but it does so well with how many songs it has. It has like well over 1,000 songs, and it has a very, very healthy blend of these songs that are remixed from old games, or like ripped straight from them, and put into this context where you have a very energetic tone and a very, very upbeat, eccentric kind of sound. Unless, of course, you're the Roost from Animal Crossing.
What do you mean? This is my favorite song.
Oh, you're a fan of the slow, sappy love song?
It has piano. I'm biased.
Yeah. But like, you have this song that's like slow. It sounds like a smooth, suave kind of love song. And you can see like Solid Snake, Grizzled Solid Snake, and like jacked Captain Falcon in the foreground, just like screaming in pain as they're like knocked off.
Get your lighters in the chat.
Like honestly, nothing is more soothing. If that doesn't serenade you, I don't know what does. You clearly have not you clearly haven't heard Animal Crossing. You gotta play Animal Crossing then. Now, we've been harking a lot on Nintendo, but then there's Sega, who has this magic touch of just being...
What Nintendo don't.
Yeah, yes. But it's so cool, and it has this attitude of, we know we're cool, and if you can't contribute to it, get out of the way. Like, it has such a commanding presence, stupefyingly funky stuff, and specifically with Virtua Fighter, the first 2.5D fighter, like the commonly attributed as like the first popular 2.5D fighter, you have like the title screen where you can actually hear like the song in context with the sound effects, and it sort of shows that like it's so it actually gives you like an idea of what you're getting into, especially if it's just for the arcade. And then in a similar vein to the character select screen, you have all this sirens, all these sirens in the lead melody that's almost like, oh, heads up, you're getting into the smash, you're getting into a fight, you are going to be taking charge and kicking some polygonal butt. Watch the points.
Yes.
And so, you know, this is cool, this is fine and dandy that we have all of this sound in fighting games. But what about when silence is actually better? What happens when keeping quiet is actually better? Well, we have what I like to call Sonic Whiplash. And no, it is not a DS spin-off for the Sonic franchise. It is just a sort of moment where all of the music and all of the normal sound effects just come to a halt. And you have this, like, this isolating moment where you kind of let the adrenaline and the dopamine kick in, and you have a very, very almost like halting thing where like in BlazBlue Cross Deck Battle, an astral finish, where it's basically an insta-kill.
Yeah, you get hit by an astral finish, you're dead. Like, that is it. GG, no re.
Negotiation, no bargaining the soul. And then you also kind of have something like in Smash Ultimate's kill screens, where you have a moment where it's like it zooms in, it's a flash, you see Donkey Kong doing a grounded up B against a Little Mac. And
poor Little Mac.
Yeah, no.
Actually, never mind, screw him. I hate Little Mac players.
All my homies love Little Mac. But like, yeah, you get that, and you just get knocked off, and it's just like it stops, and then it goes back to the action.
It's the epiphany of the moment.
Exactly. And so this also begs another question: how much is too much? Because there is such a thing as way too much music.
What do you mean? I want all the music. Give me all the sound.
Little Mac deserves it. Thanks, Sean. And like, so yeah, you have, because it is pretty common for players to drown out the music that they're given, and just concentrate on their own music, or just have complete silence. And you get this moment where it's really up in the air for what motivates the individual players. And Sexy Mallard gave his insight on this.
If the game
God, why are we all ripping on
supplies
Little
it,
Mac today?
then yeah, obviously I would use that. But there are instances where I had to, listen to my own thing, but I still kind of want something hype. Because, if you're in a tournament scene in the locals, it's too loud. I usually just like listening to what's provided, but try to kind of stick to the energetic theme.
Are you good?
Yeah, we're good. And so yeah, it gives you this insight into how not even, there are people who just want something exciting, just not what the music is. And it's totally understandable, but I'd say that it does kind of take away from the experience of what the stage and the moment was supposed to be. And to round off my section, we have one last pit stop of the mental impact that these songs have. Because this means that you have moments where players can specifically refer back to a very specific moment in their life, where they distinctively remember hearing that song for the first time, almost like any musician has with hearing Duran Duran or a song by Styx for the first time on my iPod Nano.
Gosh, we're bringing back the iPod stuff again with Garrett. Man, y'all and your iPods.
That man, his iPod Shuffle, he was a hero, and he got to listen to Imogen Heap with Magic for the first time.
Gosh.
That's beside the point. But we in our interview with Eric
Olafson, who is the
Olaf.
Yeah, Eric Olaf.
Junior conductor.
Yeah, he's
the RIT Gamer Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, so just for context, I am the current conductor of RIT Game Symphony Orchestra, and Eric Olafson, is the junior conductor along with the brass section lead. So he plays sax, he plays fighting games, he's overall cool dude, and here's what he had to say.
Often, when I'm thinking about really intense fighting game moments, I bring myself back to those fights on specifically fights on Dreamland, because I really like watching games on Dreamland, and also the songs in those intense moments and things like Smash Bros. I think when I am in an intense moment in the game, I think I bring myself back to those soundtracks in particular.
All right.
And so you have these moments where you can distinctively remember hearing the song for the first time, and it could bring you back to a venue, or to you sitting on the couch with your brother for the first time playing the game, or any of those moments. So,
all right, so that was a lot of jargon to get through, but I'm gonna summarize that all real quick. So basically what Noah mentioned was just how much like any other type of video game, a truly immersive experience is only further enhanced by the implementation of music that matches the tone and the gameplay flow. Fighting games are no different, since these songs benefit from being background music that instills the essence of the game's tone while simultaneously hyping up players. And as technology improves, more layered, dynamically responsive and carefully composed melodies will only strengthen the immersion. So you can see we have the intrinsic value of the music and how it correlates to gameplay, and if it does this well through the techniques Noah mentioned, it can instill these memories of playing this game with you and people you play with, which then brings to my point, the value of the community with playing fighting games was when they play these fighting games, it was the music that works well in the game. This music is also embedded subconsciously in their brain as associating with the really fun, atmospheric, very hype gameplay and connecting that with the hype music. And
it's
overall,
corrupt the youth with adrenaline.
And in conclusion, it's achieving that delicate balance between weaving seamlessly into gameplay, along with connecting with the culture of the fighting game community and casual fans, that gets us closer to perfecting a fighting game OST.
That was out of sync, wasn't it?
Oops. But we said the thing. We said the title.
We did say the thing. We said the title.
Roll credits.
So, yeah. We actually finished up a little early, so we can take some time for questions.
Or, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know how much time we have for questions, but if any questions you do have, I know there's a lot that we didn't cover in this panel. There's more examples. Like I said, we'll be posting this on the VGM Together Discord along with our socials. And speaking of our socials, if you have any questions about fighting game music, video game music, fighting games, please play me in Dragon Ball FighterZ, piano.
Please play me in
message us.
Battle.
Gosh, see my. Yeah, so you contact us in any of these means, any of these methods. Just had a quick shout out to our interviewees. Thank you all so much for joining. You have for a lot of insightful commentary on.
Yeah. No, Dave, we have 10 minutes. We can answer some questions.
Gosh, we don't have anything prepared for questions. We don't have like a shit.
We have Jirok.
Also, real quick, just some other references which we'll mention, like the fighting game documentaries, musical references, and also a huge thanks to VGM Together for hosting our panel, which if you haven't already joined their Discord or following them on socials, please do. They have a whole ton of good stuff going on, along with all the other stuff that they've already done.
Yeah. No, these guys were great. So, Jirok, to answer your question, favorite fighting game. I'm a melee elitist, and that is a problem.
Oh gosh, that's hard to say, but I feel like next to Melee, I haven't played Smash in a while, so it's still probably in my heart, probably one of my favorites, but at least right now, at least with the amount of hours I've put into it probably has to be Dragon Ball FighterZ. Like, gosh, they just released a new season with, like, they added in Super Baby 2, the most iconic Dragon Ball character, and man, it's just basically a love letter to the Marvel vs. Capcom series, along with a love letter to, like, the Metal Daisuke Ishiwatari, like, trend of how he's put metal soundtracks into lots of Arc System Works games, and just the combination of that soundtrack with this gameplay and the giant community behind it just makes it really special, and is the most of the reason why I use this.
And it's also the reason why you keep dragging me into the matches.
Yeah, I'm gonna make your Blue Vegeta good one day, I swear.
Yeah. And like, Sean, to answer your question.
What's the question? I don't see chat.
Yeah, they might come after us. We're trying to avoid it. Jirok, you, to lowering the barrier for entry levels.
There's a lot of interesting ways for that, actually. Did you have something to say, or?
Well, I was just gonna say that for, like, for the entry level for fighting games, yeah, that is kind of a problem that's just kind of always been around.
It's like the fans, like, on one hand, the veterans don't want the game to be too dumbed down, but on the other hand, if it's too high, then the new fans will not come in, which is, I think, a really good example of a game that's really doing well was making the entry barrier lower is Guilty Gear Strive. Man, how many of y'all in chat have heard of that? Jeez. So it's the newest addition to the Guilty Gear franchise, and lots of veterans have been saying that the gameplay is slightly easier compared to, like, XR and plus R, but it's just the amount of stuff you can easily do, and like the way they've catered to like new audiences, such as like easier combos doing more damage, when there's still technically optimal routes that you can go for that like veterans can like try to get these optimal damage loops, but like new players can still be immersed with like the fun characters, easy to pick up gameplay, and especially the rollback netcode, because rollback netcode is like one of the best innovations in fighting games. They make it so basically it feels like you have no lag playing online with somebody, and it's,
surprisingly, yeah.
People get addicted to rollback netcode. Being able to play someone online from like another side of the country and basically no lag, like it feels good. It makes you want to play more.
Ongaku, hold on, Dave. What you're talking about is cool, but Ongaku brought up a really good question. Did the rise of hip hop in Japan lead to Street Fighter Third Strike's strong hip hop influence?
Oh man, I mean, I don't want to say anything I don't know. I'm not very heavily knowledgeable on like the hip hop scene. I like hip hop. It's cool.
I wouldn't doubt it, because I want to say, because I remember reading up a little bit on Japan's underground, like I know they have like a lot of underground scenes, like they surprisingly have a punk scene and like a rockabilly scene that's still kind of thriving. So I wouldn't put it past them if they had a whole hip hop influence striking onto going onto this whole this whole influence.
I mean, it matches with,
but I think they knew what the States was, what they were doing too.
Yeah, I mean, it matches like their trend for fighting games, like especially with some newer fighting games. Like you can hear anime influence, like all mainstream anime and like J-pop influence all over these really bright neon EDM Vocaloid tracks that are being used for the new games, such as Eunice, Uniclear, stuff like that.
Jirok, is this reverse psychology? Are you trying to get us? Are you trying to get us to ask ourselves if it's a fighting game or not? Never mind.
I feel like we should just have all the rest of the questions. Like, feel free to direct it to us via whatever social media platform you choose. But then again, just to conclude, I'm DS.
I'm Noah Vinci Symphonies.
And this has been Challenger Approaching Perfecting a Fighting Game OST.
Fighting Game OST.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of VGM Together. And we will see you later.
Hold on, Dave, what? Before you do that, make sure you end on the slide where it shows the context so people can still...